What we're really looking at with resilience training is a strengthening journey, that you can have a beginning point and an end point, and the journey that you travel between those two helps strengthen you, helps equip you with tools that you can use to deal with the bumps, the knocks and the dips in life. Strategy 1 is to identify inspiring examples. And we begin here because this gives you a great sense of what to aim for. Far more than any definition, when you identify an example of resilience that inspires you, you really get a sense of what resilience is. What I'm looking at here are times where someone or something has faced something difficult and responded in a way that's led to a better than expected outcome. And I'm going to ask you to do this as an exercise where I'm going to ask you to reflect on examples of resilience that you find inspiring and to follow a 4-part story structure. So here's an example. So this is a story about the adversity faced is, what helps here is, and that leads to. So this is a way of thinking about stories of resilience. There's the downslope of the difficulty, but there's also the upslope of the inspiring response and what that leads to. I'm going to give you an example by telling one of my favourite stories of resilience. And I heard about this on BBC Radio years ago on a programme about resilience. And I'll use this 4-part story structure. This is a story about a banker called Peter Shaw, who'd been working in the country of Georgia in Eastern Europe for a number of years, offering financial support to farmers. And the adversity faced is, he was just coming towards the end of his time there when he was kidnapped. And he'd been driving in his car, he was stopped by somebody dressed as a police officer, and then out of another vehicle there are these people dressed up as soldiers and more people dressed as police officers, and they pulled him out of his car and they bundled him into the back and they drove off into the distance. He was taken by his captors to this small underground hole. You had to kind of go down these steps to get there, and he was held there for months and months, complete darkness in this very small space. And he didn't know whether he was going to live, or he didn't know whether he was going to ever make it out, and he got really desperate at times. What helped was he reached a point where he made a decision that he was going to find a way out of this. And that in order to do that, he would need to keep himself fit, not just physically fit, but also psychologically fit. So as well as doing physical exercise each day, he set himself the task of every day thinking of someone who'd been important to him in his life and composing a speech to them. So he'd spend the day searching his memory, drawing out points, composing a speech, and then in the evening he'd deliver his speech. And sometimes he'd actually hear their voices, he'd hear their support. What impressed me about this story is what he's effectively doing is he's creating a support network out of nothing, using the power of his memory and his imagination. Well, what that led to, this is the 4th part of the story. So this is a story about Peter Shaw, the adversity faced. He was kidnapped, kept in this hole. What helped was he made a decision, and he also had some practices that kept him in better condition, that kept him physically and more psychologically fit, that he kept his eye out for opportunities. He was alert for opportunities, and there was a time when he was moved by his captors to another place, and he was being walked along in the dark, and they had gun pointing towards him. But he saw there was a moment when they were distracted, they had their eyes on something else, and he took his chance. That he ran, he jumped into a bush and was down in this ditch, and then he made his way eventually was to a point where he was found by the Georgian army and made his way back home. So when I find myself in a pit, when I have one of those really big dips and I find myself stuck there, I think of Peter Shaw. And I think of the decision that he made and the practices he took part in every day to keep himself psychologically fitter. And I kind of think, if he can do that there, maybe I can do this here. And the real value of collecting inspiring examples of resilience is each tells you a bit more about how to do resilience. That when you get to know the story, when you become familiar with the story of how resilience goes, then when you're facing a situation that you find difficult, you can ask yourself the question, what would a story of resilience look like here? If I was to play my part in a story of resilience, what would I do? If they can do that there, maybe I can do this here.